My name is Lauren Jarman. I'm a New Yorker turned Southern belle, or I pretend to be at least. I now live in Charleston, South Carolina, and past 6 years I was a neurospine nurse, ironically. After receiving my master's with Georgetown University, I now work for an infectious disease practice as a nurse practitioner. I was diagnosed with MG in 2011, a couple weeks before my wedding. Since then, I've had several ICU visits, or as my husband and I would call them, mini vacations. Today we will be focusing on how to find your way with MG. We've heard several powerful stories over the course of the past several days. Although all of our treatments seem to vary, we do have similarities in experiences. I would like to focus on three key areas of coping with this disease. That is personal, social, and career-oriented areas. So our three panelists are Janet, Jean, and Alexis. Would like to introduce yourself?
Alexis Rodriguez from Atlanta, and was diagnosed 19 years ago, and went into remission after a little while, after having a lot of really bad symptoms, and after a lovely dentist appointment, everything came back with a vengeance and worse. It used to be only ocular, and then it came back as generalized. And for the last 6 years, I've taken the lead in supporting and leading the support group for the Atlanta area, and that's what is one of my most rewarding things, is getting to meet new patients and have an opportunity to provide them with love, support, a shoulder to cry, and just an opportunity for them to express themselves.
So one of the questions I have for you is, what support system or routine do you have at home that help reduce exacerbations?
To help reduce exacerbations. So for me, my biggest offenders are heat and the humidity, as well as stress. So believe it or not, I carry with a little fan, a little portable fan. I have one in my desk at work and have at home. And so I don't allow to put myself in situations where the heat or humidity is going to affect me, right? So those are some of those things that I use. For the support portion, trying to find out ways to how I can make it more comfortable for others, just because, again, I know that temperature is such a big thing for me. So I'm always trying to be proactive in making it more comfortable for other people, and that is rewarding for me. Makes me feel comfortable.
Thank you. I'd like to move on to Jean. Do you want to say a little something about yourself?
I was diagnosed about 5.5 years ago. And Nancy said, I'm a retired dentist. I'm retired from the practice of dentistry, but I have a second career. I work for a company that manufactures a high-tech dental product. So I travel internationally a lot, lecturing to dentists about this new technology. Before I was actually diagnosed, I was seeing three doctors. An ENT, because I was having swallowing problems. One day I was slurring my speech during a couple of my lectures, so I had that problem. One day the side of my face just collapsed. And my daughter, who's a physician, says, Dad, we got to take you to the emergency. You're having a stroke. I said, no, I'm not having a stroke. But I promised her I'd go see the doctor on Monday. Went to go see the doctor, my general practice doctor. And he said, I don't know, we'll send you to a neurologist. So I went to see the lady neurologist. They took CAT scans and they did a bunch of things. And they said, well, we don't know what happened, but, it looks like it's coming back. It had come back. And just take, instead of 81 milligrams of aspirin, take 325 a day. And that was it. So, but she knew I was having trouble swallowing. She knew, I was slurring my speech. You could see it. And so I went along. Maybe a week or so later, driving back from Phoenix to Tucson, where I live in the south of Arizona, my right eyelid started drooping. And so I had an appointment on Monday to see my ENT guy. So I went in to see the guy, and we're going to have to take some swallowing tests. That I was still having trouble swallowing. And I said, okay, that's fine. But what about my eyelid? It's drooping. He says, I don't know. Go see your neurologist. So I said, okay. So I made an appointment for my neurologist. And on the way home, I just happened to call my brother, who's an optometrist. And I said, Tommy, did I have another stroke or something? Because my eyelid is drooping. He says, I had a patient one time with myasthenia gravis. He says, they can test you for that. There's a Tessalon test. And I said, myasthenia gravis, I kind of remember it. It was on some test in dental school probably. But I didn't know what it was. So I went home and Googled it. And I was the poster boy for myasthenia gravis. I had every symptom. And except the double vision. I didn't have double vision. And so I went into the neurologist that afternoon, and I said, I have myasthenia gravis. She says, how do you know? I says, I know, and you can test me for it. She says, well, I have that test. I have a Tesla test. So they shot this drug, I forget the name of it, into my vein. My eye opened up. She says, yeah, you got it. She says, here, take all this Mestadon, and, you'll be fine. And I says, well, next week I'm going to the Middle East. And she says, no, you'll be fine. So at that point, I really was at a point where I couldn't barely lift my head up. I mean, I had neck weakness, muscle weakness. I took one Mestadon, and all of a sudden, my God, this is great. I feel great. And so I took it, and it was like, a lot. I don't know, every 3 hours, just a lot. And plus the time release at night. Well, as it turns out, I talked to one neuromuscular neurologist last night, and she said, an overdose of Mestadon doesn't necessarily mean it's going to put you in crisis. You're probably going to get there anyway, because it's really not doing anything to cure. It's sort of a Band-Aid. So I think it was the second night. It was in Kuwait. And I came back from dinner, and I couldn't breathe. I mean, I was panting like a dog. I couldn't take a deep breath, I couldn't do that. And so I stayed up all night long. I was completely freaked out. Couldn't get a ticket home. I was up all night. I think I took 5 or 6 cold showers just trying to stay awake, slapping myself, because I knew if I fell asleep, I might not wake up. So I called home, talked to my daughter, and she said, Dad, don't get on the airplane until you get checked out. So they took me to a hospital in Kuwait. The neurologist came in. I'd never been treated so well, by the way, very well treated. They brought in a neurologist, brought in a pulmonary specialist, and they said, you have the disease probably, but you're not being treated properly. This is a Band-Aid, just messing on, so go home and get treated. So I went home, got picked up. By that time, somehow I got better on the airplane. And so I was fighting to my wife. I says, no, I think I'm okay now. I don't think I need to go anywhere. No, we're going to the emergency. And they had it already set up. That a neuromuscular neurologist, some of you might know, Dr. Caitlin Scher, I think Charlene knows her, was waiting for me. I was in ICU for I think 5 days. The regular routine. 60 milligrams of prednisone. IVIG, I think for 4 days or so, and Cellcept. And I finally got out of there. She says, you're not going anywhere for 5 or 6 months, so don't even think about it. You're not going anywhere. And my company, one of the things you ask about is, how does it affect you in your profession or your job or, with your company? My company was very good about this. They knew I had a problem and I wasn't going to travel, but I still did what I had to do. After a couple of years of IVIG, I got into remission, and I was in remission till about 7-8 months ago, I think it was. I had too long a trip in the Middle East, and it was 3 weeks of traveling and lecturing and whatever, and training dentists. And I think the last 4 days in Cairo did me in, because it was like from 8 till 11 every day. The traffic, the heat, the humidity, it got to me. So when I got home about a week later, my eyelids started drooping, and I started slurring my speech and having swallowing problems. And so they put me back onto a higher dose of prednisone and IVIG, and now I'm in the process of weaning down and getting back into the remission that I was in. But I think the good news is that I was in remission, and I'm pretty much getting there now, and I can do almost everything that I was ever able to do before. Maybe not quite so fast, maybe not quite so well, I don't know. But my quality of life really hasn't changed that much. And so the good news is that with the proper treatment and treatment protocols and the medications that we have today, you can, I hope, I mean, the guy talked about hope yesterday, and that's really the main thing, is we have to have hope that you'll get to a place where you have a good quality of life and you can do everything you want to do. You go out and play golf. I played golf for the first time in 20 years. But I played golf in last Christmas with my son-in-law. So it was fine. So you can get back to where you were if you just, I think, follow your doctor's orders and have a good doctor. I think getting to be going to a neuromuscular neurologist, I think, is very, very important. And I have some other things to say, but I'll let Janet.
I am Janet, and I was diagnosed in 1997. And when I hear stories from so many of you about how long it took for you to be diagnosed, I know for sure that I'm one of the lucky ones. I had symptoms. My first symptoms were double vision. And it lasted about 2 weeks. And I went to a specialist, and the first thing she said to me when she walked in was, "How long have you had that droopy eyelid?" And I said, "Oh my gosh, I just had it forever." And that was kind of the end of it. She ordered an MRI, but by the time I would have had it, the double vision went away. 6 months later, I developed generalized MG symptoms. The whole gamut. The vision was still okay, chewing, swallowing, talking, using my upper extremities. I was terrified because one of my uncles died from ALS. So I was sure that's what I had. At the time, I was dating the man that I eventually married. And, we knew that we would get married, but we weren't in a big hurry. Come January, which was about 6 months after the double vision, my primary care physician sent me to a neurologist. And based on my history, just sitting across from him he was at his desk, he said, "I think you have MG." And like Nancy Law, I thought, oh, thank goodness. If I'm going to have a neuromuscular disease, this is the one to have. I had trained as a physical therapist, and I had practiced for about 11 years. So I knew a little bit about it. That's why I kind of ignored a droopy eyelid, because I thought, I don't have MG. When I'm tired, the eyelid droops a little. So evidently I had symptoms for a long, long time. At any rate, the day that I had the neuro appointment, I had a CAT scan that showed a tumor on my thymus. And the doctor said, at age 52, you can have the thymectomy or not, but let's wait and see what happens. In the meantime, Jim and I looked at each other and said, life is too short. Let's get married. So in 1 year, in January, I was diagnosed. July, we got married. In October, I had a thymectomy. And the reason that they pushed up the thymectomy was a repeat CAT scan after the wedding, after the honeymoon, after 2 receptions, showed that the tumor had changed. And so it needed to come out, and it did. I was treated initially only with Mastodon, and that seemed to control the symptoms. After the thymectomy, I needed less Mastodon. And so for a few years, I was doing really well, and I, fooled myself to think, this isn't bad. And so in terms of coping, in terms of why the three of us are up here talking to you, my story for myself, and I hope I can pass that on to all of you too, is in order to cope with MG, you need to understand it, and you eventually need to accept it. You may not like it. You may not be happy about it. And chances are nobody in this room is happy unless you just compare it to some other possible things. But it's only then that you can begin to look at your strengths rather than your weaknesses. Look more at what you can do in spite of MG rather than what MG limits you. But that's also the devastating part of having a condition like MG. We do lose a part of what we thought was ourselves or what we had hoped our lives would be. So we have to go through a grieving process. And I must have. I mean, I wasn't aware of it at the time, but one phase for me was denial. I was working full time. I didn't want to talk about my disease, except to my boss. She was a nurse. I felt that she needed to know. But I didn't want to tell anybody. I didn't want to appear weak. And that, I think, is also a part of eventually getting over the hurdles to acceptance. And that is, we don't want to be that person that people say, oh, how are you feeling today? And, when somebody says that to me, I think, am I not looking good? I got up this morning and I felt pretty good. I don't know. So I denied that for a year. And then one day I had an epiphany. I thought, wait a minute. I want my coworkers to know, because if I am tired one day and look like I'm just slacking off or being lazy, I want them to know there's a reason. It made all the difference. From that point on, I was able to build my future. And so my progress of MG, when I was working a little too hard, getting stressed, and I worked full time. I only took 5 weeks off for thymectomy. And then, the rest of the years I worked full time. But under stress, my symptoms came back pretty badly with the chewing, the swallowing. And so I was put on prednisone. And right now, almost 20 years later, I'm taking only prednisone, 10 milligrams every other day. Still some swallowing issues, never enough to say, oh my gosh, it's time for CellCep or MRAN or anything like that. But I have to be careful. And that's also part of how I'm adapting and coping. I know what's going to hurt me and what to do about it. If I don't deny myself going out to dinner, going out with friends, but I don't order thin soup. If I order soup at all, it's going to be thick. And I ask for crackers and I make it thicker. So I can still enjoy what we love in the Low Country, she crab soup. And it's things like that. Now, I will be the first to admit, and I wish my husband were here to hear it, because he'd be glad to hear it from me, I do tend to overdo it. Part of that may still be denial. Oh, I can do it. But he sees when I'm tired before I know I'm tired. And so I appreciate that. But at the same time, there's still a part of me, and I would imagine a part of all of you, that says, okay, I have MG. I know about it. I've studied it. I'm involved in MGFA. I go to a support group. I understand it. But I'm still tough. And we want to be. So we can still be tough, but at the same time, be accepting of help or change. And another thing, I think initially, and I'm sort of bouncing around here now, but initially we think, oh my God, my life is over, or I won't be able to do what I had planned for my life. And life, look at us, we're alive, aren't we? Life is not over, it's different. But, once we accept MG, we can make that different life the best that it can be for us. And so my mantra, which I started yesterday, is that we really need to continue to live, to laugh, and to love. To live the lives that we can live in spite of MG. And, to have an attitude like, instead of why me, why not me? and get involved in something. It could be, be more involved with the national organization or your support group, or going to your kids' or grandkids' ball games, taking up art like you never thought you'd do. But it's easier to do that than a lot of other things. To think about what your strengths are, what you enjoy, and pursue that. My co-chair of the support group is Julian Carnes. And Julian, it broke his heart that he couldn't come today, but the travel would have been difficult. But he's a very good example of recognizing that, I may have MG and I may be limited, but there's a lot I can do. He's a whiz with the computer. He's the one who keeps our records and keeps communication going electronically with our support group. He writes a newsletter for his alumni group. He graduated from the Citadel. He keeps in touch through the internet because he can go out, but not as freely as many of us here in the room. And so his strengths, he is working on those strengths. He's taking advantage of those strengths. And so I think that's what we all need to do. And I'll stop here. I do have a lot more to say, but Lauren, I think you have a few questions in mind for us.
Well, actually for you, Janet, even though I know you've been chatting, just as my fearless leader of our support group back in Charleston, and you just received the award for volunteer, how important are the support groups in coping and helping others?
As I said in the support group leaders workshop Saturday, the support groups are the lifeblood of MGFA. So on the global side, MGFA exists to serve you and you and you and you, all of us. And how do they do that now? Through the reorganization. It's through the support groups. So in terms of getting information, having a connection to a larger organization that has a more global view, but can also provide us with educational materials, conferences, etc. The support for the support groups, that we are their connection to the individual people who have MG and the people who care about them. On a smaller level, on an individual level, I firmly believe in support groups. I got started in Bethesda, Maryland, where we lived at the time when I was going to have a thymectomy. I was really scared. Like so many of you, I didn't know anybody who had MG. I knew what the disease was, and right away we got online, found out about MGFA, and discovered that there was a support group in our area. I went to that meeting because I wanted to know, what is it like to have a thymectomy? And it was really an eye-opener. One, I learned about thymectomy, but also I saw in the room people like me. And you know what? If I saw them in the grocery store or anywhere else, I wouldn't stop and say, I wonder what's wrong with this person. I realized there's life after thymectomy. And that was in 1997, and I've been involved in support groups ever since. So I think they're essential. And if you can't or don't want to go to a support group physically, there are ways to get support through social media, through the internet. Be advised that not everything that you would get that way would be 100% accurate. But what a support group does that the internet can't do is, on the internet, you can get information. You can learn a whole lot of stuff. A support group will hold your hand. A support group will tell you what it's like to have MG. If your doctor has prescribed Cellcept and you don't really know what's going to happen, what that's like, you have people you can ask who've been there and done that. And that makes a big difference. So I do think it's a long way of saying, Lauren, support groups are our own individual personal lifeblood too.
Alexis, how do you deal with the infamous "you look great" or "are you sure you're really sick"?
That's a good one, because I do look great. And did I just say that out loud? Thank you. It is a challenge, and in particular for somebody like me who's very hyper. I don't stop. Believe it or not, I actually do 3 jobs. Monday to Friday, I work at Coca-Cola, in an office, and on the weekends, I'm doing sound for bands. Yeah, I'm a sound man who doesn't know how to use a microphone, and so I'm always going. And I have children, young children, so that's my 3rd job, and I guess my wife would be the 4th job. So I stay busy all the time, and I'm always in go, 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 and I average, 5 or 6 hours of sleep. And people say, "Well, you don't look sick," but I am, because I do get tired. I do have double vision. I do see. I mean, right now this room is extra full of people, and it's thinned out. I know that, but just at lunchtime, I was having lunch, and Mike says, "Are you seeing double?" Because he picked up immediately, right? And I said, "As a matter of fact, yes, there's 2 of you." And so how to deal with that? You look fine. It's talking to people. I keep a lot of people informed. I have no problem talking about myasthenia gravis. I take every opportunity to talk about it. I'm on Facebook. I talk about it, not just during the walk, but I'm constantly talking about it. So people know. I just posted it about the award that I got, and I had so many people say, "Great, good job, Alexis," and it's because they know the struggles, and I've taken the time to explain. I'm not